Before we begin tonight, I want to say something to whoever is listening right now. Whether you found this channel an hour ago or you've been here since the very beginning, welcome, I'm grateful you're here. If this story moves you the way I think it will, do something for me before it pulls you under. Tap that like button, drop a comment, and tell me where in the world you're tuning in from tonight, because I read every single one. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and let me say it properly. Welcome to Quiet Badge's Stories. Now find yourself a comfortable place, turn the lights down a little, and let me tell you about a woman named Sloane Mercer. For 2 years, Sloane Mercer had let the world believe she was unremarkable. It wasn't hard. Unremarkable was easy to maintain if you kept your eyes down and your voice soft and learned to fill a room the way water fills a space, quietly, without taking up more than you needed. She had done it on purpose every single day, from the morning she walked into the Dunmore Veterans Care Center with a forged employment record, and a version of her name she had never used before, and asked if they were hiring. They were. They always were. Nobody wanted to work long-term care on the eastern edge of a city that had forgotten it was still a city. That had been the point. She was 37 years old. She had 3 scars, a call sign nobody in this building knew, and a father she had not spoken to in 2 years because speaking to him would have meant admitting she was still alive. And some mornings that admission felt like more than she had the right to make. The night everything changed, the Dunmore lobby was dressed up in other people's money. Crystal and white linen, candles in tall glasses, shrimp arranged on silver trays in little curling rows, the annual Legacy Gala. 300 donors in evening clothes who had written checks large enough to feel virtuous about a war they had watched on television. At the center of it all, holding a wireless microphone and wearing a suit that cost more than Sloane's monthly salary, stood Desmond Farrell. Farrell was what happened when a man discovered that courage was easier to sell than to have. He had built a small empire on it. Speaking Circuits, a best-selling memoir about sacrifice he had never personally made. A non-profit that spent 60 cents of every donated dollar on Farrell himself. He had never served a single day. He spoke about it constantly. "What we're honoring tonight," Farrell said, his voice rounded and warm the way voices get when someone has spent years shaping them for audiences, "isn't just the men and women who wore the uniform. It's everyone in their orbit, everyone who holds the space." He paused for effect. His eyes drifted across the lobby and landed on Sloane by the service table. Like her. Sloane went still. 300 heads turned. "Look at this woman." His smile was generous and sure, the smile of someone who had never once been wrong in public. "She shows up, every night she shows up. She doesn't know what those warriors went through out there. None of us do. But she carries the trays. She changes the linens. And that kind of quiet, humble service?" He pressed a hand to his chest. "That matters, folks. Let's hear it for the people who keep the lights on." Applause soft and well-meaning and completely unbearable. Sloane looked at the floor. She let her shoulders curl inward the way she had trained herself to do. She had gotten very good at small. Small was survivable. Small kept you off the radar of anyone still looking for the woman she used to be. Behind the velvet partition, down the dim corridor that smelled of antiseptic and old linoleum, lay the actual hospital. The men the gala claimed to honor, asleep in narrow beds with their windows cracked because the HVAC hadn't worked right since 2019, and nobody had found budget to fix it. Sloane set her tray down and moved toward the corridor. She needed the corridor. "Sweetheart." Farrell's voice followed her across the marble. "One more water when you get a moment?" She got him his water. She did not look at him when she set it down. "See," Farrell told the room, "no ego, pure service." She pushed through the staff doors and stood in the kitchen with both hands flat on the cold steel counter. She breathed in through her nose, held it, let it out slow, the way her father had shown her on a fishing dock when she was 9 years old, kneeling beside her in the gray early morning with all the patience in the world. "Fear is just weather, Sloane. You wait it out, then you do the work." "He's something else, isn't he?" Carla Nguyen, the night-charge nurse, leaned in the doorframe with a coffee cup and the expression of a woman who had seen too much to be surprised by any of it. "You all right?" "Fine." "You let him do that right in front of everybody." "It's easier." Carla studied her the way she always did, not quite satisfied with that answer, not quite sure what question to ask instead. She had worked beside Sloane for 2 years and still felt like she was reading a book with half the pages torn out. "You're a strange one, Mercer. Quietest nurse I've ever known. But sometimes I look at the way you move and I think, that woman has done things that have nothing to do with bedpans and vital signs." Sloane almost smiled. "Community college in Ohio." "Sure," Carla said and didn't push it, and went back to her station. Sloane moved through the inner doors into Ward B. This was where she actually lived in the only real sense of the word. The gala was theater. Ward B was the thing underneath it. Bed 6 was awake. Harold Boone, 79 years old. Army medic, Korea, and the first stretch of Vietnam before his lungs had started collecting the damage that would eventually win. He had maybe 3 weeks left, and they both knew it, and neither of them pretended otherwise. His eyes were clouded at the rim with age and sharp underneath, in the way that only a man who had watched people die for 60 years could be sharp. "They trot you out there for the show again?" Harold asked. "Something like that." She checked his oxygen line, adjusted his pillow. Her hands moved with a competence that had nothing to do with nursing school, and Harold watched them the way he always did. The same way you watch a thing that doesn't quite fit the frame it's been put in. "That man out there talks about sacrifice the way a car salesman talks about adventure," Harold said. "All the right words, none of the weight. He's what they paid for." He was quiet a moment. "Then you're walking different tonight." She didn't answer. "I've been watching you 2 years. I know your walk. Tonight it's off. Something's sitting on you that wasn't there yesterday." His hand, papery and dry and warm, found her wrist. "There's a difference between keeping quiet and going underground. You've been underground this whole time. I never pushed. But tonight the air feels wrong." He closed his eyes and opened them. "I had a CO in 53, didn't say 10 words a day. But when something was coming, he'd go still in a different way than his normal still. You're doing that right now. Get some rest, Harold." "Something's moving up the road," he said. Old medic learns to feel it in his chest before his brain catches up. He settled back against his pillow. "You check those exits on your way out." She already had. 3 of them, force of habit. It never left, no matter how many years she spent trying to make it. She tucked his blanket up, said goodnight, and went to do her rounds. Bed 2 needed repositioning. Bed 9 needed midnight meds. She did the work with her hands and let the rest of her mind go where it always went when she let her guard down. To a mountain road in a country she was never allowed to name. To a convoy that should have been safe because she had verified the intel herself. To the sound that came 4 seconds before the first explosion, and the 2 minutes after it that she would not describe to any living person. For 2 years, she had believed those men died because of her, because she had missed something, because she hadn't been enough. She had believed it because someone had needed her to. She didn't know that yet. She was about to find out. At 9:22 p.m., the ambulance bay doors at the end of the corridor blew open like a gunshot. Not a scheduled transfer, not a quiet roll, a crash. Boots on tile. A voice cutting through the distance, clipped and trained. "Penetrating GSW, right lateral thorax, entry only. He is losing pressure, fast. I need a doctor right now." Sloane's head came up. Dunmore was long-term care. No surgical team, no trauma bay after hours. Nearest level 1 was 40 minutes south. She set down the chart in her hand the way you set down something. When your body has already made a decision, your mind is half a second behind. The second voice came from the gurney itself, lower, pressed through the kind of pain a certain type of person does not show and cannot quite hide. "Where is she? I need the nurse, Mercer. Sloane Mercer." The cold that went through her had nothing to do with the temperature. Nobody in this building knew that name said like that, like a last coordinate someone had held in memory for a very long time. She moved into the corridor. He came into view at the far end under the fluorescence. A big man on a gurney, 2 paramedics fighting to hold him steady, his left hand jammed against his own side at an angle she recognized before she was conscious of recognizing it. Not pressing on a wound, occluding a vessel. Buying himself minutes the way a trained person does when they understand that panic is the thing that finishes you. He was an operator. She knew it before she reached him. The stillness under the pain, the economy of motion. Civilians thrash. They grab at the people trying to save them. This man was doing triage on himself and conserving everything he had left. His eyes found her across 40 feet. He stopped fighting. "Nurse," the lead paramedic, young, breathing in shallow bursts, the whites of his eyes showing, locked onto her scrubs and moved toward her. "We have nobody here. On calls at the gala. His pressure is." "What's his name?" she said. "Keene," he kept saying. She leaned over the gurney. "Keene," she said it once, level and even, and he opened his eyes and found her face and held it. "Cricket." His voice was gravel and air, one word. The only people who knew that name were the ones she had bled beside. "You found me," she said. "Stop spending air you don't have. Look at my eyes. Breathe when I tell you." "Your father," he coughed, pink at the corner of his mouth. Her stomach dropped. "Colonel Mercer. He sent me before he— Cricket, he's—" "Don't talk." Her voice was level as stone. "I've got you. I've got the rest of it. You can stop now." Later, she would let the rest of that sentence land. Not now. Now there was only the work. She turned. Desmond Farrell had materialized at the mouth of the corridor, with half the gala crowd pressing behind him. Drawn by the noise, phones rising like pale candles in the dark, he wore the expression of a man who had just found a camera pointed at him. All right, everyone give them room. He spread his arms wide, filling space, taking charge of nothing at all. These first responders need space to do their jobs. This poor woman is clearly overwhelmed. Let's get someone on the phone to a reel. He was still talking when Sloane looked at Keen's right shoulder. At the way it hitched with each breath, small, ugly, mechanical. At the neck veins standing up like cords. At the gray of his face against the white of the sheet. She had watched what was happening inside his chest kill a man once before, on a hillside, while she screamed for equipment that never came. She had sworn on her knees in the dirt that it would not beat her again. If she stepped forward now, 2 years of nobody were over, every wall. Every morning she had told herself that small was enough, safe was enough, that she had earned quiet and quiet was all she needed. She looked at his eyes, he was still in there, barely. Harold's voice moved through her from somewhere down the hall. There's a difference between keeping quiet and going underground. The decision was already made. It had been made the moment he said her call sign. You, she pointed to the lead paramedic, 2 fingers sharp, biggest angiocath in your kit in my hand right now, you. The second one, direct pressure at the exit wound, both hands, I'll show you exactly where, Carla. The charge nurse startled like she'd been touched. Crash cart to the corridor and clear every civilian from this hallway. I mean everyone, right now. Nobody moved. They were staring at her because this was not the woman who had carried a water tray across the lobby 11 minutes ago. I said now, Sloane said quietly. The hallway came apart and jumped to her voice the way a room does when it has been waiting for someone to tell it what to do. Farrell tried to get back in front. Now hang on just a moment, someone needs to call an actual hospital, this woman is. He put a soft hand on her shoulder to move her aside. She did not move. Take your hand off me and sit down. He did. He was back against the wall before he seemed to understand he'd moved at all. She dropped to one knee beside the gurney, and her hands went to his right chest wall, reading the ribs by feel, fast and sure, the way she had done it in forward operating bases and helicopter bays and once flat in the mud with her face an inch from the ground. Second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. She found it without thinking. Her hands had not forgotten a single thing, no matter how hard she had tried to make them. She uncapped the needle with her teeth. What is she? Farrell's voice had lost its studio finish. Someone stop her before she. She set the needle and drove it in with one smooth, controlled push. The hiss was immediate, long and sharp and unmistakable, trapped air pouring out of the space around his lung. The sound filled the corridor. Keen's chest fell on the failing side. His next breath came, then a deeper one. The blue at his lips faded toward gray, then toward something that was almost like color. On the monitor, the falling numbers caught, held, began to climb. The hallway was completely silent. 300 donors in evening clothes, 2 paramedics, 1 charge nurse, 1 man who had built a career on selling the language of courage to rooms full of people who would never need to spend it. All of them watching a woman in blue scrubs pull a man back from the edge with her bare hands and a needle. He's stabilizing, the younger paramedic whispered. Pressure packing on the exit wound, Sloane said. She walked the second paramedic's hands into position and locked them. Don't lift, don't shift, don't get curious. You are his blood pressure right now. Do you understand me? Yes, ma'am. Mark the time. Write it on his arm if you have to. She straightened. He needs a vascular surgeon, and he needs one in the next 40 minutes. Call the helicopter, tell them single GSW, tension pneumo decompressed in the field, patient stabilizing but critical, have vascular standing by on the pad. The lead paramedic stared at her over his locked hands. Who are you? Nurses don't, how did you know to? From somewhere near the back of the crowd, a voice cut through the silence. An older man in a dark blazer had moved to the front. Silver-haired, straight-backed, with a small pin on his lapel that Sloane clocked in one automatic glance. The kind of man who wore service the way other people wear a watch. He had been watching her since the moment she entered the corridor, and his face did not hold shock. His face held recognition. I served 22 years, the man said, loud enough for the room. Army. Retired Master Sergeant. And what I just watched this woman do in under 3 minutes was a needle decompression of a tension pneumothorax. Done correctly by hand, with no guidance, no hesitation, and no second thought. He held her gaze steady. I have seen that done once in my life. It was not done by a nurse. The corridor held its breath. My son came home from overseas because somebody did what you just did, the old soldier said, and something rough came into his voice at the bottom. I never got to find out who. I've thought about those hands for 15 years. He looked at her directly, in the way of someone who has spent a long career looking at people directly and letting them see it. So whatever you are, ma'am, whatever you were, somebody owes you something they can never square, and I know it when I'm looking at it. He stepped back, the room leaned in. Sloane rose to her feet. She did not curl her shoulders. She did not look at the floor. Her spine was a clean line that had been made on 3 continents and had never actually left her, regardless of how many years she had spent trying to fold it down to nothing. "My name," she said, "is Sloane Mercer." The lights went out. All of them, the whole wing dropping into sudden total black. Monitors screamed once and fell silent. The exit signs bled dim red at the edges. Outside, a backup generator coughed twice and gave up entirely. Carla made a sound. Sloane did not. "That's not a failure," she said, quietly to the room. "Stay exactly where you are." She had been counting heads since she entered the corridor. She already knew where every exit was. She had known since the first minute she walked in. She always did. 3 men came through the east stairwell door 80 seconds later, low together without any of the noise that civilians make in the dark. The night vision down, weapons up, moving with the patience and economy of people who had done exactly this in darker places and never once come up empty. They had not come for the patience. Her father's last act, Colonel James Mercer, retired, who had died 11 days ago in his sleep, who she had not allowed herself to grieve because grieving meant stopping, and stopping meant the walls all came down at once. His last act had been 2 years of work done by Senior Chief Keene, 2 years spent assembling the proof that the convoy ambush was not bad luck and not her failure. It was a deliberate sale. Routes, timing, personnel, all of it traded to the wrong side by a defense contractor named Nolan Frist for a wire transfer and the belief that he was buried too deep to ever be found. Keene had been bringing the folder to her, the only person her father trusted to finish it. Frist's people had caught up with him on the highway. He had driven 20 miles bleeding before he chose Dunmore, because a dying colonel had told him his daughter was exactly the person to hand this to. Sloane understood the shape of the whole night in the 90 seconds it took her to give Carla her instructions. Evacuate everyone south, give Farrell something to carry and a job to do, or he would become a liability, and to strip the corridor down to what she needed. She took the folder from Keene's vest first, waterproof sleeve sewn into the lining by careful hands. She walked it down the hall to Ward B and pressed it into Harold's grip in the dark. Harold's fingers closed around it without being asked. His eyes opened. "I knew it," he said. "One more job," Sloane told him. "Soldier to soldier, hold this line." "Go on," Harold said. "I've got the package." She went to work. She had no rifle. What she had was a hospital and 12 years of training and a mind that had been forged to read any ordinary room and see a dozen ways to prepare it before the first move was made. She moved through the dark east corridor and seated it the way her father had taught her. An oxygen cylinder at the mouth of an alcove, a crash cart rolled to a corner, a fire extinguisher lifted cold and certain off its bracket, an IV pole repositioned in the shadow of a doorframe. Prepare the ground before the fight arrives. Half the work is done before the first shot. The 3 men came through the stairwell door and fanned into the corridor with the unhurried confidence of people who had never once underestimated a room. They had not been in this room before. She let the lead man pass the alcove and brought the oxygen cylinder across in a short, controlled arc. He went down without a sound and did not get up. The fire extinguisher bloomed white fog down the corridor before the second one could bring his weapon to bear. The night vision that had been their entire advantage became a blank wall they could not see past. One of them clawed at his goggles, shouting. He did not finish the sentence. The third was the smart one. He gave ground, found a wall at his back, and swung his barrel toward Ward B, toward the men in the beds, toward Harold and the folder. She was already moving. She crossed the distance before his arm finished its arc. She came in inside the weapons line the way 10,000 repetitions engrave emotion into muscle and bone until the body does it without being asked. The wrist, the weight, the floor. 3 clean movements and he was face down on the linoleum, with her knee between his shoulders and his rifle in the dark. 3 down, not one shot fired into the ward. She keyed the radio she had taken, east corridor secure. Static. Then a voice she didn't know, Mercer. Frist didn't come through the doors. He staged the entry team as a distraction. He's not here. Her blood went cold. He had gone for the one thing worth more to him than the men he sent through the doors. The folder. And the folder was in the hands of a 79-year-old man, with failing lungs at the end of a wing she had just left empty. She ran. She hit the Ward B door low and quiet, and there was Nolan Frist. He had come in through the ceiling, a maintenance access above the ward that almost no one on Earth would have known existed. He stood over Harold's bed in the dark with a pistol in one hand and the other open, palm up, patient as the grave. "The folder," he was saying, soft, reasonable. "Hand it up and we both go home tonight, that's the whole deal." Harold Boone looked up at the man with the gun. 79 years old, 2 wars in his body, lungs losing their last long argument. He pulled the waterproof sleeve tighter against his chest and did not move. "Son," Harold said, "I have been dying since March. You're going to need something a good deal scarier than that. Frist. He turned. Sloane stood in the doorway. Her braid had come loose. Her scrubs were torn at the shoulder and gray with extinguisher fog. Someone else's blood had dried brown on her hands. She was the calmest thing in the room, and they both understood it, and one of them was afraid of it. Donovan's daughter, Frist said slowly. He had the careful voice of a man recalibrating in real time. Heard you broke after the convoy. Heard you buried yourself somewhere quiet and stayed there. You sold my team, she said, and you let me carry it for 2 years like their blood was on my hands. Business, he said. His gun hand moved to cover her. Walk away and stay buried and we call it even. That's the only deal on the table. Put the weapon down, Nolan. He swung the barrel back to Harold. Or the old man goes first and you live with it. That was the mistake. She crossed the room before the barrel finished its arc, the way 10,000 repetitions make a motion so deep in the body it happens below thought. The wrist, the weight, the direction of his own momentum used against him. And then Nolan Frist was face down on the linoleum of a forgotten veteran's ward with his arm locked behind him and his pistol against the far wall. 2 years, she said, quiet even, not one word above a conversational level. 2 years I carried those names like I had killed them myself. His cheek was against the cold floor, so finish it. She held the lock, she breathed. She let the thing that had been building behind her ribs for 2 years move through her, and then she set it down. No, she said, that's what you are, that's not what I am. She used IV tubing from a supply cart to bind his hands. The knot was the kind a person ties when they have tied it in darker places than this. You're going to stand up in a courtroom, she told him, and every name inside that folder is going to stand beside you in the light. Everyone. That isn't mercy, Nolan. It's worse. You're going to watch the whole thing come apart in front of people who get to see exactly what you always were. The ward doors opened. Police lights spilled red and blue down the long hall, and someone with a badge cleared the room and someone else spoke into a radio, and slowly, finally, it was over. Harold Boone held the folder up in one trembling hand with the full and quiet dignity of a man who has just won the last engagement of a very long career. Held the perimeter, he announced. Lost nobody, you can put that in the report. Sloane crossed to his bed and took the folder and then his hand. For the first time in 2 years in front of anyone, she let her eyes fill. She did not look away from it. Outstanding, she said. Knew you had it in you, Harold said. His voice had gone thin at the edges and proud all the way through. His fingers held hers. Don't go back underground, girl. Promise an old man. I promise, she said. And she meant it. By morning, Keene was in surgery at County. The vascular team called it the cleanest field stabilization they had seen come in off a street call in years. Frist and his men were in federal custody. The folder passed into the hands of serious people who would spend the better part of 18 months dismantling everything he had built, and they would find every name. Desmond Farrell stood alone in the emptied lobby in his fine gray suit, holding nothing. He looked like a man who had just tried to give a speech and understood halfway through that he had never known the first thing about the subject. Sloane found him there as the early light came through the tall windows. He couldn't meet her eyes. All those years he started, all those stages. I pointed at you and called you the simple kind and I had no. I know, she said. He waited for her to finish it the way it deserved to be finished, in front of anyone left to hear it. She chose a different sentence. Stop selling it, she said. Not unkind, not soft either, something more honest than both. Go find out what it actually costs someone to live it. Stand in a room with men who came home and couldn't explain what was wrong and sit with them until you understand it. And if you ever point at a quiet person again and call them simple. She held his gaze for one more second. Remember tonight. Remember what simple looked like when it stood all the way up. She left him there and did not look back, because some debts are settled simply by walking away whole. Harold Boone died on a Tuesday morning in late October, with sunlight coming through the cracked window the way he liked it, and Sloane's hand on his. He told her he wasn't afraid of it. He told her he'd been ready since April and had only been staying to see how it all turned out. Well, she said. Well, he said, and the corner of his mouth moved. That'll do. The new wing at Dunmore opened 5 months later. They had wanted to name it for a senator, or a donor, or someone with a check and a recognizable face. Sloane named it the Boone Wing, for an army medic who had held a perimeter in the dark with failing lungs and a folder pressed to his chest and not 1 second of doubt. On the morning it opened, a young veteran came through the door, 23 years old, hands shaking so badly he held one with the other. He couldn't put a word to what was wrong. He was certain that no living person would understand. A nurse with a long brown braid and clear gray eyes and 3 quiet scars sat down in the chair beside him. She did not look at the floor. There was no fold left in her shoulders. She looked him straight in the eye the way you look at someone when you have decided not to flinch from whatever you find there. She said the only words that have ever truly reached a person standing in that particular dark. "I know," she said. "I've been exactly where you're standing, and I'm not going anywhere, so let's start there, and we'll take it one step at a time." Courage is not a speech. It is not a microphone, or a room full of applause, or a name printed on a program for an evening you will not remember. It is what you do in the single moment when no one expects a thing from you, when being seen costs you everything you have spent years protecting. Sloane Mercer spent 2 years learning to be invisible. She spent one night remembering that the bravest thing she had ever done, in all her years of doing brave things, was to finally stop.